Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Brian Sizdek. I'm a psychologist and product manager at Stolting. We're a publisher of psychological assessments, including the Stroop test. In this video, I want to talk with you about scoring the Stroop color and word test. In the previous video, we talked about how to administer the test. So now at this point, you've administered, gathered the data. I want to give some instruction on how to take those scores and convert them to standardized scores that you need. First of all, we do have computerized scoring available for the Stroop test for both the adult and children's version. Information on the computerized scoring can be found at stoltingco.com/Stroop. The computerized scoring will do all the score conversions for you and output the format into a nice report. You can also manage client-patient records and recall those and track your data. You can go to the website at stoltingco.com/Stroop and get information about the test, about the different kits available, information about what the test measures, some information about the computerized scoring and examples of reports, and some resources. There are two versions of the Stroop currently, what we'll call the previous version, which was released in 2004, and a new normative update version that was released in 2022. The previous version is still available for just a little longer. We're sunsetting that and transitioning to the normative update, so you should get any new kits as a normative update. Both versions have an adult and children's version. They both have the same stimuli on the inside. There's a little bit more explanation about what the differences are on the website. Basically, the normative update has, well, it's got new population data, some slight differences in the scoring. We'll be talking mostly using examples from the normative updates, but I will give you some examples of what the differences are between the normative update and previous version as we get to those issues. So to score the test, you're going to need a few things that you will have collected during administration. You'll need 3 raw scores, the word, color, and color word raw score, and those are just the number of items correctly responded to in 45 seconds. You'll need the person's age, rounded down to the nearest year. You'll need the highest education completed to the grade level or to the full or towards one of the categories as labeled in the normative update. That's only for adults. For the kids, age and grade are essentially the same. Manual, you will need, if you don't have the computerized scoring, it's got all the scoring tables. And you'll need 1 record form. Summary page for recording the data. You need to use 1 record form for each administration and to submit each report for each administration. So in this scoring overview, we'll talk about how to score the word, color, and color word raw scores. Get those. Then we'll be taking those raw scores, obtaining a predicted score for each scale, which is a function of age and education for adults or just age for kids. We'll be subtracting that prediction from the raw score, and that gives us a residual or deviation. Okay, so we're taking the performance, the raw score, and subtracting off what we expect the person to get based on comparison to same age peers, and seeing how they did compared to that. That's the deviation. We then take those residuals and convert them to Tscores, which are standardized scores. For the interference score, which is a measure of predicted interference that's based on a person's performance on word and color tasks, we're going to compare that by subtracting that from their actual performance on the color word raw score. Then we'll take that difference, the interference raw score, and convert that to a T-score. So that's the steps we'll go over. First of all, the summary page will look like this in the normative update. It's got a section for demographic data. We'll start by covering the areas that you'll need for scoring. I'm assuming you can complete all that demographic data on your own, use it as needed to suit your testing purpose. So the first thing you'll want to get is an age rounded to the nearest year. And just to cover briefly how to calculate an age if you're doing it by hand, you'll write down the testing date and birth dates going from year, month to day. If you have a number that's smaller that in the top, so you're subtracting a larger number from a smaller, you need to do some borrowing. Just like you would borrow during long subtraction, except here, remember the units are a little different. So if you need to borrow a month, then cross off a month, decrement that, and add 30 days. And then if you need to borrow a year, decrement the year column by 1 and add 12 months to your month column. You can then do the subtractions. And as I noted, you'll just want to truncate down to the years. So just the last full year completed, in this case, 70. For education, on this normative update, you'll want to check the highest education completed. As children, as noted, that's not needed because age and education are basically overlapping for kids. So let's assume in our example, someone has graduated high school. We'll check that they've achieved a high school diploma. On the previous version of the Stroop, you'll want to note the highest grade completed, and that's by years. So in the U.S., high school diploma is earned after 12 years, so that would be 12 in this case. Now we'll get into the scoring using our raw scores. So let's start by calculating the word, color, and color word raw scores down to the Tscores. So in this example, let's assume this individual got the following raw scores. We will note those. We'll then want to get what the predicted scores are for this person. So to get that, we'll look in our appendix in table 1 in the manual, and this is in the normative update version. Table 1 in the normative update is aggregated by highest education completed. So we'll want to look at table 1. We'll want to look at the set of tables that corresponds to highest education. In this case, we said our individual earned a high school diploma. So we'll look at this set of tables. And all the word, color, and color word separate tables are all combined here. So we've got word. We said that this individual is 70, so we'll look down at the age row where 70 falls within, and we'll see that this individual's predicted score for word is 90. Now, one thing that you'll notice here is that the age is not exactly in the same intervals. That's a little different in the normative update compared to the previous version where the band of ages were regular. So it's just a little bit more accurate to use this. We'll do the same thing for color, and we'll see that a predicted color score is for a 70-year-old 61, and for color word, we'll get that predicted color word score is 30. We'll note all those values in our predicted score column. And then, so as I mentioned, if you were using the previous version of the test, table 1, each score is listed on a different table. So table 1 lists the predicted word scores. These are based on age and education. And as I noted, it's by the year. So age 12 corresponds to a high school graduate. So we'll look in that column and we'll look at where the age row matches, in this case 70, and we'll see that there's a predicted word score of 97 for this individual. We'll do the same thing for each of the tables. I've noted where the table numbers are different. And then, whether we're using the new or previous version, we'll then get a residual. And we're simply subtracting the predicted score from the raw score. Signs matter, so if a raw score is higher than the predicted score, it'll be positive. If it is lower, then we'll have negative, and we'll just go across and do the subtractions. So then we want to take those residuals, which is how a person performed versus what they were expected to perform, and convert them to T-scores. That gives each of these scores meaning, allows us to compare across different scores. So in the normative update, all the T-score conversion tables for the residuals for word color and color word are listed in table 2. And here, for each of the scales, we'll want to look at the raw deviation in the left column in this case, where that corresponds to that scale is the T-score. So remember, this individual had a negative 45 for a residual. So we look at that column in raw deviation of negative 40, where negative 45 is that row, and go across the row to the word column, and we get a T-score of 20 for word. We'll repeat that process with each of the other scales, noting the correct raw deviation row and finding the T-score that corresponds to that scale. In the previous version, that's in table 4, but the process is the same. Okay, so we've gotten T-scores for word, color, and color word. We want to do the same thing for interference. So interference is a comparison of color word performance compared to what we expected that individual to get based on their color and word performance. So we first will record the color word raw score. We said this person got a 40. And now we will get the predicted score for color word, which is a function of, as I said, color and word. So we go to table 3, we get a predicted interference score. We are going to find the row where that individual's word score matches. And we're going to find the column where that individual's color score matches. And now, remember, this individual had a color score of 55. So this is noted in the manual. We just want to round to the nearest score that's available. You can see that the scores go by bands of 4. So 55, the closest score is 54. If it's a score that's right in the middle, so if it was a 52, which you see falls exactly between 50 and 54, round up. So that would be a 54. So in this case, in our example, we expect that the individual would have scored 26 on color word. We note that in the predicted score for interference. And again, we subtract. But in the previous version, that process is exactly the same. In fact, the scoring is exactly the same. It is just on table 5. So we go across and subtract, and we get that the interference raw score is 14. So this is like the residual that we got for the color word and color word. And at this point, we need to convert that residual interference score to a T-score. One thing that's different about the normative update is we've got the interference T-scores grouped into 2 groups, those below age 68 and those at or above age 68. The reasoning is described more in the manual, but that's just more contextualized. There's a break point in the scoring that was found at that age. So our individual, we said, is age 70, so we'll go to those set of scores in that table where the age is over or equal to 68. There was a residual of 16, that raw interference score, that corresponds to a T-score of 74. We'll note that in our table. In the previous version, it's the same process. There's no breakdown by ages. So you can see there's a difference here where that T-score is different. And that's because we're grouping that individual age 70's performance with everyone before. And there is a drop-off in performance as people age. So it's important to note how normative that drop-off in score is. That table is in table 5 in the previous version for the predicted score and table 6 for the T-score. Okay, well, we have scored all the scales. We've obtained T-scores for each of those different scales. And a new feature in the normative update is we've got a plot. So, that can really help people understand performance by plotting the T-scores, give them a nice visual to look at, and can help you as you're explaining. So T-scores, we know, this is explained more in the manual. I have a mean of 50 and standard deviation of 10. So you can see labeled and color-coded are the zones of where an average performance would be, getting into more significant, like an elevated at 1 standard deviation out, and then getting to strongly or clinically significant at more than 2 standard deviations from the mean. So here you can just plot some bar graphs. We said that this individual's T-score for words 20, so I'm just going to go through and plot each of these T-scores. You can level it off at that number and kind of fill it in below. And 46 for word, and 60 for color word, and I think 74 it was for interference. And so this is nice to see the different scores as this. A lot of people put a lot of stock in the interference score. That's what they think of when they think of the Stroop. We can see for this individual, he or she actually performed above average on interference. So if we were just looking at that metric alone, we might conclude that this individual's whatever the Stroop is measuring, executive functions, processing speed, and efficiency, is performing quite adeptly. But we can see that one reason that interference score is elevated is, well, he did fine. He was right at average or 2 above average in color word, but remember, interference is a comparison of color word to color and word scores. He did quite poorly, very much below average on word. And so that's, the slight elevation in color word combined with that low performance in word makes that interference score especially elevated. So there's a little bit of information about interpreting a pattern like this in the manual. It seems like this individual might struggle with word, with language. He seems to be processing speed well. He did the color word, and it's actually not an uncommon pattern when we see that an individual struggles with language, that their color word performance is more enhanced. That word is not as much of an interference to them. So that would be something probably worth exploring more about language with this individual. And, this emphasizes the need to interpret all the scales and not just focus on interference. Okay, let's summarize what we've talked about. This table is very detailed, but it covers everything you need to do for scoring. It's listed in page 12 in the manual. So we first went and converted the word color and color word raw scores to standardized scores. And we started by recording the raw scores we obtained during administration, giving our age and education, noting all those down because we're using those to do the scoring in the appendices. Next, we got predicted scores, and those predicted scores for word, color, and color word are from the manual. They're a function of age and education, so we just find the approach where age and education rows and columns intersect for each of word, color, and color word. In the older version and the newer version, they're separated by education level, the tables. So we go to the appropriate table and then find the corresponding age and get those predicted scores. We note all those on our record form. And now we get the residual or deviation. And again, that is that is our raw score minus predicted. In other words, how well the person did compared to what we expected them to do. We recorded those as residuals. We go to table 2 to get all our predicted scores, and then convert those to Tscores. So that allows us to compare, like we saw in the plot there, we can compare a word score to a color word score and identify discrepancies. Okay, we then worked on calculating interference scores. To do that, first of all, we got a predicted interference score by consulting the table and finding where this individual's word and color raw scores intersected. Next, we converted that interference residual, and interference residual is the color word raw score minus that predicted interference score. And we converted that residual, our interference raw score, to a T-score using table 4. Well, that covers all the process of scoring the Stroop using the normative update and adapting that as needed for the previous version. Hopefully this helps you go through the process. See, the computerized scoring I do recommend if you're doing a lot of scoring. It will help save some time, but it is good to know the underlying scoring mechanism so you understand really what's going on with the scoring. And the Stroop's a neat test how it compares what we expect a person would do versus it's compared against peers and then also compared against themselves. So you can see that how that the scoring allows us to compare in that way. If you have any questions, please let us know. I'd be happy to help talk through anything. We can go through that scoring together. Thank you.